Reports say nearly 12 million people around the world suffer their first stroke each year, and half of this number are people under the age of 70. Now, you'll agree with me that that's quite a disturbing statistics, which is why today we have decided to look at something very crucial, which you will get to find out later on. Good evening and welcome. This is Gyna Plus, your women's health program, where we discuss real health issues that help you to live a better life. My name is Doris Mayim. This program comes up every Wednesday at 6 p.m. and you can catch up with the repeat broadcast on Saturday at 8 p.m. And of course, our YouTube channel, Afia Culture and Lifestyle, we have all of the health information that you need to learn on that channel. So do well to visit. So after this break, you're going to meet my beautiful guest, someone who is quite new on this set. I'll be looking at the issue around stroke. You will agree with me, or you may have noticed at some point that young people too are coming down with stroke. So many questions as to why is that so, prior to the knowledge we used to have before. But not to rush into that, you will get to find out more after this break. Do stay tuned. Thank you for staying here. You're still watching Gyna Plus right here on Afia Television, and this is a program where we talk about health issues that affect women and girls, sometimes children. But today is somewhat special because we're talking about something that's quite unique that affects both men and women, young people alike, and that's the issue of stroke. And thankfully, 29th October is World Stroke Day, and you will agree with me that it's quite timely to discuss this topic because the theme for this year is every minute counts, meaning that there is a need for us to act fast so we can save lives. Once again, I am Doris Mayim, and I have a very beautiful guest in the studio today. Very calm, professional in this business, and she'll be giving us all the information that we need to know about stroke. I'm talking about Dr. Chiamaka Okereke. She is a consultant neurologist at the University of Nigerian Teaching Hospital. It's good to have you on Gyna Plus, ma'am. Welcome.
Thank you, Doris.
Yeah, you look so calm. I had to use the word calm. I like to work with calm doctors. How are you doing, ma'am?
I'm fine.
Yes, the issue around stroke, it's been a concern in recent times.
Yeah.
So even away from the fact that, it's in an international day, which of course we are commemorating, but people sometimes are concerned with the fact that young people too are coming down with stroke. But before we get into that, give us the basics. When we hear stroke, what is that thing that comes to mind really?
Okay, awesome. When we hear stroke, well, to the lay person, even the term, it was coined from, people thinking that the person has been stricken by the gods. Yeah. So if you, even in our local dialects, like in Igbo, stroke means, or what the Igbo word for stroke is mbammo. That's like the spirits have, come down on somebody. But what is stroke really? Stroke just means that a particular part of the brain has suffered death because the blood supply to it has been tampered with. So that's what stroke is. So when a particular part of the brain, dies because blood supply to it has been cut off. And the blood supply can be cut off either by a blockage in the blood vessel that supplies that part of the brain or a rupture of the blood vessel. So when this happens, someone is said to have suffered a stroke.
Wow, irrespective of the age.
Irrespective of the age.
So, but are there issues that predisposes one to having a blockage and all of that? Are there really factors that, are responsible for that?
Okay, so that's an excellent question. So talking about that, we have risk factors for stroke. And the way we want to look at it, we have what we call the modifiable risk factors for stroke. And we have the non-modifiable risk factors for stroke. When we say modifiable, we mean these are the things that you can do something about. But the non-modifiable ones, you can't really do anything. Something like age. The older a person is, the more the chances the person has to have a stroke. The family history, some strokes run in the family. So when a family member has suffered a stroke, it becomes a risk factor. Okay? Then our race, African race, puts us at a risk. We have a higher risk of stroke than the Caucasians. Yeah, before menopause, women are kind of protected from stroke. So being male becomes a risk factor. But after menopause, somehow the risk equalizes.
So,
So yeah,
yes.
so these are some
So
of
men are
the,
prone to
yes, men are more
more
prone
prone
to
to
stroke,
coming.
yes,
Oh,
than women. Then the modifiable risk factors, the chief is hypertension. 90% of those that have stroke have hypertension. So hypertension is the commonest modifiable risk factor for stroke. Other non-modifiable risk factors include diabetes, which the prevalence of diabetes among those that have had a stroke is not as high as hypertension, but it is still a very big risk factor for stroke. Another is what we call dyslipidemia. That's when the lipids, or what we commonly know as cholesterol, is not in the right proportion, becomes a risk factor for stroke. Another risk factor is smoking. Cigarette smoking is another big one for stroke. Then we talk about alcohol. When you take alcohol, well, even these days, we are now saying that no amount of alcohol
it's
is
safe.
safe. So alcohol is a risk factor for stroke, especially what we call binge drinking. That's, you've not always been drinking, but suddenly you just see drinks and you start drinking and lose your mind. So that's a risk factor for stroke. Sedentary lifestyle is a risk factor for stroke. So what is being said now is that sitting down for more than 2 hours is like smoking cigarettes.
Oh.
So it's a risk factor for stroke.
Okay.
So what we expect that everybody to be active, because if you are not involved in any strenuous or moderate activity, for 3 times a week, you can be said to be sedentary.
Ooh.
So that's a risk factor for stroke. So these ones I called now are what we call the traditional risk factors. Then certain illnesses and diseases, can predispose one to stroke. Heart diseases, kidney diseases are causes of stroke. Then other things, we have the emerging risk factors, some other things that have been found to be linked to stroke now. Something like sleep apnea. That's people that sleep and they are not really sleeping. It's been associated with stroke.
So you're not
now.
having enough sleep, or for it.
No, not really. You are sleeping, but somehow you keep on waking up. We call it micro. You're waking up in beats. You may not even know, but one of the commonest ways to suspect that you have sleep apnea is when you wake up in the morning and you don't really feel rested, or when you sleep off at every slightest opportunity during the day, like you sleep off in the
Yeah,
church,
you doze off.
you doze off in the car. So it's important to go check if you have sleep apnea. So it's an emerging risk factor for stroke. So these are some of the risk factors.
Okay, so they're quite elaborate, I must
Yes,
say,
they are.
and it calls for, maybe later on we'll talk about ways to go about it. But then again, it's are there triggers now in terms of how do I look out for the signs? Because I know I can just sit and probably go normal, go down with stroke or something. What can one basically look at for to say that, oh, this might be a sign, and then at what point should you not rush to the hospital?
Okay, fine. That's a great question again. Strokes. Are there signs for strokes? Well, from the definition of stroke, we define stroke as sudden neurological deficit.
Wow.
Sudden. So I dare to say that really there may not be signs, but then there is something we call transient ischemic attack. That's the only thing that can be said to be a sign of stroke. But unfortunately, it doesn't happen to everyone before stroke. Transient ischemic attack is when you have symptoms that look like a stroke, but within minutes, maximum of 24 hours, you fully recovered. So we can say that you had a transient ischemic attack. That's blood supply to a part of the brain suddenly, went low and then came up again. That is, it's before long, any person that has had that will likely come down with a stroke. So that's the only sign. So examples are when your hands suddenly, became weak, then
Even when that's when you're not carrying any heavy
when
thing.
yes, maybe you're holding something and you suddenly drop the thing, you can't move your hand,
Oh.
you couldn't speak, or maybe you couldn't move, or you lost balance, and then after a while you recover.
That's different from numbness. So that there's a way you can sit and then your hand goes dead, more like it's
No,
numb.
no, no.
That's not it's not the same
No,
thing.
no. That's weakness, more like.
Okay.
Even though there are different signs of stroke, actually, because the sign that a stroke comes with depends on the part of the brain that was affected.
Oh.
So yeah, numbness could be a sign of stroke, but what we say is that anything that is happening on one part of the body,
Okay.
it's likely to be a stroke, especially if it's sudden. Okay.
Okay, when we come back from the break, I'd like us to talk about why young people are more, are also coming down with it, because I think that's a concern. And then, of course, women. You're still watching Gyna Plus, and it's getting really interesting and somewhat scary. Sometimes we don't just want to hear certain things. But then again, it's important we know these things. We'll take a break. Once we are back, we'll continue with the discussion on stroke and all that you need to know. Please stay tuned. Welcome back. If you just joined us, you're still watching Gyna Plus on Afia TV. And of course, we are discussing the issues around stroke and what you need to know. My name is Doris Mayim, and this program comes up every Wednesday at 6 p.m. Majorly a women's health program, but on special occasions like this, we talk about issues that affect everybody. And I'm sure this is one that you should also pay keen attention to. I see her with me, Dr. Chiamaka Okereke. She is a consultant neurologist, University of Nigeria Teaching Hospital. Doc, you've been doing an amazing job. Now, as much as you're opening our eyes to a lot of information, I also like you to address the issue around young people versus old people coming down with stroke.
All right.
Prior to now, it used to be, I'm not old, so why? It's more like an attack. So witches and wizards from the village are coming on. Talk to us about that. Talk to us about that, really.
Okay, thank you. Actually, most neurological conditions look like village people's attack, actually. So why do young people have stroke, or why are young people coming down with stroke these days? So there is an entity called stroke in the young. When stroke occurs in somebody that is less than 45 years, so we say that that's a stroke in a young person. So why? First of all, the traditional risk factors, that's what I mentioned before, are now becoming commoner in young people. For instance, obesity, hypertension, and all that, heart disease, kidney disease, they are becoming commoner in young people. So that's why when those risk factors that cause stroke in older people occur in young people, you still come down with stroke. Then other things, the HIV, HIV is a risk factor for stroke because it causes a lot of damage to the blood vessels. Okay, so it's a risk factor for stroke, and young people are engaged in risky lifestyles that predispose them to HIV. Another thing is genetic strokes. So there are strokes that run in the family, genetic factors. Okay, I don't want to bore us with their very long names, but when they are present, the strokes are more likely to occur at earlier ages. Another one is use of substances. So you will agree with me that young people are more likely to use substances like cocaine, amphetamines, and there's this new one, all these things, that substances.
Knock off the brain.
Yes, and they affect blood vessels. So once the blood vessels are affected, they predispose people to stroke. Yeah, they can just make the blood pressure to go very high, and that is a risk factor both for blocking of the blood vessel and rupture. So they become risk factors for both types of stroke, especially the one that occurs due to rupture.
Okay.
Okay, so that is it. Then for women in particular, use of oral contraceptives, becomes a risk factor. At least it puts them at an elevated risk for stroke. Then migraines too are a risk factor for stroke in women, especially the type we call migraine with aura. So these are common reasons why young people may come down with strokes. And of course, the other things we talked about earlier, smoking, alcohol.
And a sedentary
Yes,
lifestyle.
and sedentary lifestyle. More young people are very busy on their phones these days, so they are less active and more predisposed to stroke.
Okay, I mean, thank you for giving us that perspective. So, you mentioned earlier that stroke is a sudden neurological,
Yeah.
So, but what now? Let's talk about the theme for this year's Stroke Day, which is every minute counts, meaning that of course you should act fast. So, but for someone, since it's sudden now, how do people rush in now? At what point does the acting fast really becomes evident? Just put us through that.
Okay, thank you. So what we say in stroke awareness is that time is brain. Okay, time is brain. So for every second that passes, brain cells, what we call neurons, are being lost. So if you are able to move the patient to the hospital immediately. So stroke is not like seizures or other conditions that you want to give first aid. Yeah, because what can you really do at home? Usually some people say give aspirin, but there are, like I said, there are two types of stroke, and you're not going to be able to tell which one you're dealing with. Yeah, we can hazard a guess, okay, because the person didn't lose consciousness, but the person is not vomiting, the person is not having seizures, maybe is a type that has to do with blockage of the blood vessel. So you give aspirin. It is just a maybe, because I have seen many patients that you would think that this stroke is the one, we call it ischemic stroke, there is blockage, and you eventually do what we call neuroimaging. You see that it was the rupture type. So really, there is nothing much we can do at home except to quickly move the patient to the hospital. Time is brain.
And that happens when you visibly see someone falling down or not being able to move.
Yeah, so what we look out for is, with the acronym, we say be fast. So somebody suddenly loses balance, okay? Or there are eye changes, eye signs, or somebody cannot move the limbs, okay, or speech, okay. So, or there is facial deviation. So I said the acronym is be fast. B is for balance, E is for eye changes, F is facial deviation, A is arm, person cannot leave the arm, speech is S. Then the T there is time is brain, time to call an ambulance, time to move the person to the hospital. So that's what we say, because at home, I'm not sure there is anything you can really do for somebody that has a stroke. But if you are able to move the person to a facility, then we are able to quickly do an imaging and say, okay, is this type of stroke or is the other type of stroke? And we start what we're supposed to do to save the neurons.
Okay, but now talking about saving the neurons, does it actually work? Because I mean, I've seen cases where people try to go towards a herbal kind of seeking help. They tell you there are things, there are procedures that, we've seen it online.
Yeah.
And some come to testify that, oh yeah, my father, my mother, it all worked for them. So first of all, first question is that like, do people actually make it out of, this condition? Is there some sort of healing? That's number one. The second one is, for someone who is already down with it, is there a way they can manage it? Is it, so they can still live normal lives?
Okay, thank you. Well, like I said, the stroke happened in the brain, not in the hand, the weak arm or the weak, limbs. So most times those herbal treatments, imagine that the stroke is in the arm or in the limbs. And I tell you, anybody that had a stroke and survived in a herbal home could have as well survived in their houses. That's the truth. Because when you come to the hospital, there are a few things we do. First of all, we want to try to reclaim the brain cells that are surrounding the dead area. So we try as much as we can to stop the cells that are around the dead area from equally dying. Okay, that's the first thing we do. And then the next thing we do is that we try to prevent complications of the brain death. And I don't see exactly how or what will be offered to somebody that has had a stroke in a herbal home. Most of the people that survive there are people that had minor strokes, small strokes, so they are able to survive. But I tell you, I have seen it countless times. You'll be in the hospital and they bring in a stroke person. Person had a stroke 5 days ago and is now worse. Where are you people coming from? They will tell you they're coming from. So most times, what the people in the herbal home do, once the person is getting very sick, they send you to the hospital to go and die. Meanwhile, you could have come earlier and we would have put in our protocol and our strategies in place and be able to at least save you. I agree that many times the brain, the stroke may have happened and the person's recovery is slow. But these days we practice or we work with the principle of what we call neuroplasticity. We believe that brain cells are able to take over function of the dead cells. So there is a lot we can do. So after the acute care, or even while the acute care is on, we institute physiotherapy.
Okay.
So physiotherapy is now what helps the person, to regain function. A lot of times people regain function. At other times they remain disabled. But then we continue to follow these patients up to ensure that they get reintegrated into the community. You understand? So they have stroke, but we don't allow them to remain in that disability. So we just have to find a way to enable them to get reintegrated into the community.
That's fair enough. Thank you. So we'll take a break. We would come back to this discussion, but there's so much that I'd like us to continue with, and I'm learning a lot already on the show. You're still watching Gyna Plus on Afia TV. Do stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're still watching Gyna Plus on Afia TV, and of course, at this point, you've been following us from the beginning of the show till now. You realize that we've been talking about stroke, and my guest in the studio has done such a wonderful job. And if you've been listening from that time till now, you could have picked one or two things like myself. I still have Dr. Chiamaka right here in the studio. And yes, you were talking about you follow the patient through till they get reintegrated back to the society. And let's talk about actual caregiving. For someone who is caring for a stroke patient, for instance, and of course they have to take them back home, are there like simple tips that can help them? Of course, it can be very inconveniencing, so to speak, but it's your loved one, I guess, so it means that you should still be there for them. Are there practical tips that can help them still care for this person without them breaking down, generally, just briefly? Okay,
thank you very much. Usually, caring for somebody that has a stroke can be very stressful on the caregiver. So, the practical tips is, one, realize that you too, you need care. Because we've seen in fact, a very sad occasion, somebody was caring for somebody that had a stroke. And she had her own stroke and it was a very bad one and she died.
Oh my God,
so
that's sad.
If you're caring for somebody that has a stroke, please also remember to do check yourself because it alters everything around you. Your income, having to go out, you're under stress, you lose sleep, okay? So you must also get respite. So I know that there are a few respite homes in Enugu where sometimes you can take the person for a while so that you can get a break, rest, and come back. Is one thing that, you can do. But if you can't, supposing you are not able to afford it, please always check yourself. A few times, I tell the people working under me, this caregiver, please check the person's blood pressure. Please try, as you've reviewed this patient, review the caregiver also. And then a lot of times it's a very emotional work, okay? So we work with psychologists, we work with psychiatrists, and sometimes they get a review from these people, and there are some cognitive therapies that can be given to them to enable them to continue the work. And then it's also important that the person that is living with the stroke continues physiotherapy, okay? So that before long, they are able to do some things for themselves, and the burden becomes less on the caregiver.
All right, thank you so much. Now, one last question. The general tips. I know, excuse me, earlier when you started, you mentioned certain, risk factors that could predispose one to
That's
come in.
true.
Yeah. So, and you said inactivity was one of them. So I'd like you to please just give us like safety tips on that, on how young persons and even old people alike can, not find themselves in that situation.
Okay, great. So the tips, to stay away from stroke. There is this scary thing that we say that 1 in 4 who have a stroke, don't let it be you. So it's not my portion. You have to be doing something so that it won't be you. What can you do? Get active, move, don't be sedentary. 3 times in a week, go do some strenuous or moderate exercise. So when we talk about moderate exercise, we mean things that you do and you're not able to sing. So some people say, Doc, I walk for morning mass. Is it not enough? And I ask you, are you able to sing as you walk? If you say yes, then that's not part of it. So anything that you can do and you're not able to sing or talk,
While you're doing it.
while you're doing it is not moderate enough. So you need to engage in activities that you can only just say a few words, okay? And that is it. Then diet. Well, there is a recent study that shows that people that eat a lot of fruits and vegetables are less likely to have stroke. So we can indulge in that.
Eat enough fruits.
Enough fruits and vegetables, okay? Just move and then eat fruits and vegetables. Take water, all right? And then
Rest.
Yes, rest.
Because I know.
Sleep well. So it's not just about sleeping. Ensure that you sleep well so that you're not having micro sleeps and you're not well rested.
All right.
Then avoid risky lifestyle, smoking, alcoholism.
For women, you talked about oral contraceptives.
Yes,
too.
oral contraceptives. Predispose them to. So you can discuss with your gynecologist on safer options. Okay.
All right. Thank you so much. Honestly, I wish we could go on and on, but I mean, time is against us. Thank you. I mean, we've had Dr. Chiamaka Okereke, who's a consultant neurologist at the University of Nigeria Teaching Hospital, talking about stroke, all of the risk factors and everything that we need to know. And it's been such an informative episode. This is something that you shouldn't miss. So share with your loved ones. And yeah, this will be up on our YouTube channel, Afia Culture and Lifestyle. So you could share it and let people get to see this information. It's been such an amazing episode. Thank you once again for watching. I am Doris Mayim. See you next week.